Now, the presentation that's coming that's coming up now are Mark. So Marcus Popetz and Alyson Mike. All right, the two of you are both here. Excellent. Okay, our next session, and this, and so we've been having lots of discussions about AI. Now, their session is going to be reframing RSI, your best defense against AI misuse. And I'll just do real quick. Everybody here know what RSI is? And you can type it in the chat. And it's okay. Marcus will Marcus
We'll
will take
define
care
it.
of that for you. Okay, so Marcus and Alyson, please take it away.
Excellent. I learned more about drills than I thought I would know in today's session. So, yeah, so I will kick us off. And just a quick note, I'm actually coming from the Quality Matters conference, so there's a little bit of an informal setting here to make sure we can make this happen. But so my apologies if people end up wandering by in the background. We'll call that real life learning experience. Yeah, so I'm going to lead in a little bit with some introduction and some definitions. But before we do that, I just want to introduce myself and let Alyson introduce herself. So I am one of the owners of Harmonize Learning, and I spend a lot of time out talking about pedagogy and RSI and AI and strategies to do this and to work with it both for and combating and all these different things. And I'm constantly learning. And then I bump into people who are doing even cooler things than I imagined, and that's how I ended up talking with Alyson. So we'll get into a little bit of the weeds here, but Alyson, if you'd like to introduce yourself in whatever way you see fit, and then we'll take it into a bit of what we're going to talk about today from there.
Fair, thank you. Nice to be here with everybody. I'll just make this brief. I guess the best way to describe is I'm a recovering middle school science teacher that made the leap several years ago to the nonprofit and then into higher ed. And that's kind of where I'm camped out right now is University of Silicon Valley. I am one of the deans and a faculty development primarily. And so a lot of what I do is really support our faculty in sort of upping their game. We have like the best of the best in terms of adjuncts, yet, as you all know, like a lot of adjuncts don't have that teaching background. Julie, I love your comment about should be awarded sainthood. I agree. I've done coaching as well since I left the classroom. And I think anybody in the classroom right now has some sort of award for sainthood. So I'm really excited to chat with everybody today. So
yeah, and so let me lead into what struck me about how Alyson approaches the world that I think is interesting. So I'm going to start with a definition of RSI because it's going to cement you firmly into the mud of bureaucracy and checklists and all of the things that none of us like. And then I want to talk about how Alyson approaches this in an entirely different way. So RSI stands for Regular and Substantive Interaction. It's a federal guideline that basically says, hey, instructors have to be present in the classroom, in the online classroom. And if not, we can't really call that online learning. And so it's pretty straightforward, right? Nothing rocket science there, but anytime you say federal guidelines, people get a little twitchy. So the specifics of it are that you have to be in the classroom on a regular basis. You have to be substantively interacting with your students on a regular basis, and they actually take time to define what that means. That's like direct instruction. It can be giving feedback on homework. It can be facilitating a discussion. It can just be as simple as answering questions about your course and content. But it's this whole idea that like on a normal basis, you need to be in the class, but you also need to be monitoring the class to see like which of your students need your help. So I almost define it as like, yeah, that's teaching. So I'm glad we have federal guidelines on it, but because we have federal guidelines, can we use that to sort of more systematically approach what we're doing? There's a lot of groans in the audience when we generally talk about this because it's another federal guideline, right? Like something that we don't really want to necessarily focus on. But the way Alyson approaches this ties in with something I heard at the keynote here in QM, which is this idea of like, there is a motivation for what you do. Teachers teach for specific reasons, like they love to teach, they want to teach. Why did you get into teaching? And they're always striving to get better. At least most teachers are always striving to get better. I won't say all. And at the keynote, they were reframing, some of these AI discussions as well in terms of like, how do you make it a motivating factor, and how do you make it something where like, yeah, the QM rubric, if you're familiar with that, could turn into a drudgery checklist, but it's really about, having more fun teaching. Because if you're teaching with good structure, your students are more engaged, and therefore they want to be there. And it's much nicer to have a group of students that wants to be there than those that don't want to be there. And so RSI is really about motivating the students, I think. And we'll dive into how Alyson approached this in a moment. But I just want you to keep that in mind. Like when you're approaching a problem, this was I think a very succinct point. It was Dr. Christy Ford, who is the Chief Learning Officer from D12. She was running the keynote. And she said, if you can figure out what the pain point or the motivating factor is for the people who you're trying to get to do something, then understand it through the lens of what they're doing, reframe it through the lens of what they're doing, and you can have a lot more success. So the way we're going to reframe RSI today is that, we all are under this threat of AI completing assignments, AI writing the essays for the students, AI cheating, AI misuse, whatever you want to call it. But you can get into the role of policeman and try to dive into that. But what Alyson is doing is kind of a two-pronged approach of like motivate the students by having really strong instructor presence, motivate the students by having like really strong peer interaction and peer connectivity. And then because you're motivating the students, they're less likely to want to cheat. Because it's a little harder for them to cheat, but also because there's more value in what they're doing. I don't know, Alyson, I made all of that up on the fly. Does that sound like a fair representation of some?
I like the made up on the fly. And I leap tall buildings in single bounds and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, that's all good.
Perfect. Okay, great. So since she's going to put on a cape and she's going to leap through buildings in a single bound, so let me give you a little outline of what we're going to do today. So Alyson is going to walk through some of their process of how do they approach RSI, how do they monitor for RSI, but then how does she pivot and turn that into a motivational thing with her instructors, and sort of what that looks like. That's a very, very rough outline of what we're going to go through, but we're going to spend a lot of time on that. She is the reason that I met Alyson is that she is using Harmonize. I'm not going to try to do a sales pitch for Harmonize today if some people are nervous about that, since I'm the owner of the company. I will hang out if there's a few minutes at the end, and I'll show you kind of some of the peer review tools she's using if there's time. But this is going to be more about her approach, her pedagogy, how she's doing these things in the classroom and such. And without further ado, I think I would turn it over to you. Do you need any more lead in from that, Alyson, in terms of
I don't think so. I think if anything, just probe some questions or look for some questions in the chat as we go along here too.
All right, I will be in the chat because there are a fair number of people. There's 200 and plus people in here.
That's
so
awesome.
Yeah, logistics wise, throw your questions in the chat. I have David in the room as well. He has a resource or two from Alyson that he's going to share in the chat when the time comes. He'll be helping me monitor the chat. I'll monitor the chat, and I'm innately a curious person, so Alyson is going to bring something up that will inevitably trigger a question for myself as well, and so I will approach it with those. And so without further ado, Alyson.
Great, thanks, Marcus. I appreciate that. So to give you a little bit of a background, I joined USV about a year and a half ago. The provost, I'd worked with her before. She brought me in because we have a really amazing set of adjunct faculty, but things were just really messy, very loose, not really consistent. And there was feedback from students that said the same. So one of the first things I did is just looked at everything. And I talked to a lot of faculty. And I think one thing I saw, I'm a TikTok junkie, by the way. So this week it was actually kind of serendipitous. I was watching a TikTok video of a guy who was teaching somewhere in an East Coast school. And his comment was, it was his first time being an adjunct somewhere. And he goes, does anybody ever give you feedback? Like, it's the weirdest thing. Nobody ever gives me feedback. I feel like I go, I teach, I walk away, and nobody gives me feedback. And so that's sort of the approach that I took about things, is that we have to do this RSI. And we look at RSI very much like Marcus says, but we do it also with a layer of retention in terms of trying to support students. And this has evolved over the last year and a half as well. Where we first started was just looking at grades. We had a lot of faculty who were on it, and they were getting their grades done and, you know, so forth like that. And then we had faculty who were like, you know, oh, once or twice a quarter they'd grade. And that was good enough. Well, what we tried to do is that I went in, and again, it was like no judgment. I just wanted to see what was happening. And what we saw was there was not a lot of feedback in terms of what students were submitting. There were very few rubrics to be had. And so that's sort of where we started. And so I did some lunch and learns. I brought some faculty who were doing in some really good things to do some lunch and learns, share how they were like grading and how they were giving feedback. And some of them were doing some amazing things. So like some classes, they have students share their, we're a creative art school. So it's like digital animation, gaming design, gaming art, gaming engineering, and audio tech. And so students would be producing things, and during the class, the instructors would be giving them feedback. And so that feedback was then shared within the whole class. So everybody was sort of seeing what everybody else was doing. But we wanted to sort of more formalize that process a little bit, if you will. And so we started with the grading. And so one of the things that we did was just said, hey, everybody has to have a rubric. It's part of RSI. I created and developed a lot of rubrics that we shared. But what I found is that when I got into courses that I was just looking for grades and feedback, I gave faculty individual feedback. So we have about 65 faculty at any given term, and they get they refer to as the love note from me. And I say, here's what I think you're doing really, really well. And would you like to share this with your colleagues at a lunch and learn? And here's some areas for growth. And at first I thought, well, we might get some pushback on that. And we didn't. And it was amazing. Most of the faculty said, thank you. No one's ever given me any feedback. And so this first part, we just focused on the rubrics and the grading. And within 2 terms, almost every faculty were using rubrics regularly, and their feedback started to improve. So that was like the first part. And then
before you go on from that,
yeah.
People are so nervous about critiquing colleagues, critiquing online adjuncts and such. Like, was there anything in particular you did, like when you went into these things of like positive mindset, like I'm only going to offer one compliment and one critique and followed by a compliment sandwich? Or was there anything you did to approach it, or you just went in as a nice person, assuming the best and it all went well?
Yeah, I think so. I have a mentoring background too. And I mentored I worked with an organization, we did mentoring. So a lot of it was just sort of using the language of mentoring as well. But I always went in with the positive presupposition that they were doing really great things. And here's some ideas on how to elevate what you're already doing. And I think I can give you one example. We have an audio tech instructor who is amazing. He actually works at one of the big gaming companies, and he's the guy that make sure that, like, when you're playing video games, all of the background sounds and music and soundscapes, he does that for a big, large gaming company. And when we talked and looked at what he was doing, his questions that he was asking students were pretty low level. And he was like getting very frustrated. And I said, well, Colin, just copy and paste your questions and go put them in AI right now. And he did. And I said, so why would they do anything in your class? But use AI, because you're not, to mix it up. And I focused more on his frustration about what students were turning in and how we could flip the script. And since then, he has changed things, and he's using a lot more where students have to demonstrate what they're doing. They do a little peer interaction, and the engagement with his class is like ramped up considerably. Again, he was doing some really good things. It was just helping him reframe how he was doing things. So once we got past sort of the grading thing, then we started to expand it more with the full RSI set. So I look for grading, I look for feedback. We look for, are they doing weekly announcements, and just, making sure students know what's happening, what's going on, and so forth. How are they engaging with the discussions? And, or are they what are they doing with video? Are they posting it or having students engage around that video? And keep in mind, we have both we have a campus presence. We have a very large online presence. Some are high flex, some are online synchronous, and some are asynchronous. So I shared that with all of the faculty. And the first term I did it really well was probably spring of last year. And I went through every single class that we have. It took me almost about a month to do. And I looked under the hood everywhere. And this time, I sent out messages to all of the faculty. They were much more detailed, much more in depth than they were the first time. And again, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Most feedback were scheduling. A lot of the faculty right out of the way started scheduling time with me. Like, how do I do this better? And I think just starting with a lot of what they were doing well and the places where there was a room for improvement, I always tried to find some things that they were doing well in that, but here's how you might want to do it a little bit better. And I got to be honest with you, like I was like really blown away because we have a lot of faculty who are the big dogs in the gaming industry or the audio tech industry. And for me, this person who works remotely from Montana coming in and saying, hey, this is how you should do things. I thought I'd get a lot more pushback than I did, and I didn't. It was absolutely amazing how faculty just embraced that. So I didn't do everything at once. We just sort of like started to kind of work little pieces, and I just kind of met people where they were. When I saw faculty doing really, really good things or really great things, I'd invite them to do lunch and learns, and they have. For one thing, for example, we have a faculty who has we have a lot of neurodiverse students, and she was doing some really cool things in her class to help support students with ADHD, autism, and some other things. She did a lunch and learn. We had about half the faculty show up, and it was simply because I was in her class and I saw what was going on. And faculty now they like to be recognized for this. And I think it's just sort of opened the door for a lot of better dialogue, even between faculty.
I love that.
Marcus, I see you priming for a question.
Yeah, no, I'm coming off mute. I'm coming at you. So one thing I hear a lot from our customers is that like I can't get faculty to attend these types of training. So I'm assuming you must have a culture of improvement or a culture of wanting professional development. Is that intentional in any way? Are there steps you do to do that, or is it something you inherited because you're only been there a year and a half? Like how do you cultivate that sense of like getting better at this and such?
It's been a bit of a chore. It was not really built into the DNA. My boss, who's the provost, is very much, we're lifelong learners, and I mean she teaches 1 to 2 classes as well, and she is very open when she gets feedback from me, like that. Everybody's very transparent about that. It did start slow. It was not something that happened overnight. We do have in our faculty handbook that faculty are expected to have so much professional development each year. USV will provide it. If they want to go somewhere, we have some opportunities for faculty to get like conference fees paid for and so forth. Or they can go out on their own. And so a lot of what we were doing is what I would hear from faculty when I would meet with them one-on-one. Oh, it would be really great if we had this. And so I would find somebody on our faculty who was doing that. And that's how we'd start a lunch and learn. And I found it much better faculty learning from each other than from me. One-on-one with me, they're great. But there's a sort of a camaraderie with, I would say, with our adjunct faculty that, we're adjuncts and we're not full-time like you. So we're going to listen to the adjuncts. It's just like, K-12 PD, like if you bring somebody from the neighboring school over, they speak much more wisdom than you do, who's probably been doing it for a million years. So that's really kind of how we started. And it's been growing. We're actually doing a series right now on AI and how do you embed AI in your course. And we've had probably at least 25 to 30 faculty showing up. And I always post the recordings, and it's blowing me away how many people are watching the recordings. So it's like, you got to find, if you hit the right nerve on what it is, and that seems to be just spinning things up and making things better. So.
And do you feel like the things that the instructors were asking for were specific pain points? They're like, I'm frustrated with XYZ, therefore that's why it works, because you're addressing their pain?
Yeah, we have, I think, I don't think it's unique to our school. We have a lot of gamers, and, everybody has a perception of what gamers are like, and it's not all wrong, and they'll admit it. And so we were having trouble, like students would like just consistently late work, or they weren't really engaged with the things that we were doing, or, just that was what I kept hearing from faculty. So one of the things I started with the gen ed faculty because I'm responsible for them as well. So we sort of flipped the script a little bit. So in our gen ed, we have math, English, speech, the usual. And so what I asked and psychology is what I asked all of those instructors to do is to tailor their course to students who are gaming students, animators, or audio tech. So for example, in our English 101, it's all based on a lot of TED Talks around people who are doing some really innovative work in gaming or animation. And students write their like persuasive essays or argumentative essays based on things that are interesting to them because it is their area of study. I teach physics, and so I have flipped the script on my physics class, so I teach it for gaming students. So for example, we did like Newton's law a couple of weeks ago. So students had to come up with either finding video games or creating a short clip of a video game that illustrated Newton's laws. For my audio students, their option was to create a soundscape that demonstrated Newton's laws. And same thing with my animating students, create an animation that shows Newton's laws. So I'm putting it in the context of what their area of study is. My engagement is through the roof. I've never had such great engagement and frankly, great grades in my physics class until we flipped the script. We flipped the script.
I'm guessing it's a lot more fun to grade as well.
Yes, it is. I'm learning so much. Like I know nothing about like how to create things in like Godot or Unreal Engine. And I tell students that I'm very transparent. I just say, I don't know anything about this. And so now this week's assignment is they have to teach me how to create. I'm trying to remember what we're doing this week. I did put it together. It's been a long weekend, but whatever the topic is this week, the students have to show me how to create a game sequence demonstrating that module. If I can build the game using Godot or Unreal Engine, they've met the mark. So they're loving it because they get to teach me how to do it, but I'm loving it because they're showing me the physics. So it's a nice back and forth, if you will.
So you're doing authentic assessment of tying it to their real lives, their real world, and that increases motivation. So I'm going to tie us back to the subject real quick here. We're talking about AI misuse and how RSI can combat that. So, there's three different things that happened in the past 2 minutes here. One is that instructor motivation, right? Like there's research that shows if the instructor is enthusiastic and is in there and is motivating and is interacting with the students, that cuts cheating. There's no research directly on AI cheating, but just cheating in general, like the instructor motivation helps that. So that's one check down. Authentic assessment, we just did a webinar last week about how authentic assessment makes it harder to do AI, but also you don't really want to do AI as much because now suddenly you've somehow made physics relevant to my life, which when I was in physics, that was not the case. And so now we've made it relevant to their life, so they're more hesitant to use AI, but also harder to use AI. And then the third thing Alyson is doing here, she's using multimedia to represent this, and this is where Harmonize comes into play. She's using our platform to help share the media back and forth with students. But the fact that AI can generate text is well known and is super hard to combat. But as soon as you've asked them to build a video game, maybe they used AI to assist that, but that doesn't matter as long as they're able to demonstrate the physics principles that she's asking about. So it's like AI maybe assisted that. Well, I don't know if it matters or not, Alyson, so maybe chime in on that one, but AI assisted that. And so now we've got like these multiple prongs of like how AI is just not really there, but it's all done through like good learning pedagogy.
Absolutely, yeah. So the last speaker said, teach students how to use AI. And I will say, like in our English class, one way that she's been doing it is she says, all right, write your resume and your cover letter using AI. And the students, then she deconstructs it with the students. And like all of a sudden they realize how cheesy their cover letters all sound the same when they've used AI. And then they realize like how AI could help them make a better resume. But if they just use AI to create the resume, it's not so great. Our speech instructors right now, and yes, we do use Harmonize. He was actually using studio and just like the video tool in Canvas. We use Canvas as our learning management. He was doing that prior to that, so you can do it either way, but he has no written anything in his speech class. So every week he does the video prompt for the discussion for the week. He makes a video and they have to respond to that prompt via video, and they respond to each other. So all the students are doing is everything is on video. So there is no written documentation. There is sometimes he has to limit the videos because he said I could be watching videos till I'm 90. But a part of it is a speech class. So he's trying to teach them how to be a little bit more, sharper, pithy in their comments. But yes, it's amazing how much that has improved. Because I used to get texts from him all the time. It's like, oh my God, all they did is use AI. They don't even know what they're demonstrating in their thing. They just AI'd it and they're just trying to read off a script. Now, even if they're still doing video and they have to sort of ad lib what they're doing. And so it's more of an authentic assessment from that. I met with one of our art teachers last week, and again, they share each other's work and give feedback. And I showed her how to just have use Harmonize, basically, or a video component to provide feedback to each other using video. And she goes, oh, I might wait for another week or two. I noticed in her course this week, she's actually already implemented, and students are responding that way. So just using the video component or sharing student work and having them critique each other has really dropped off our AI use in terms of using it for good versus evil. So
a question came for you in the chat from Dr. Ramat, which says students can use Replit or AI agents to create science simulations. Do you check if students are using AI agents? And I guess I would follow up to that also. Do you care?
So we tried to care, and now I don't. And what I mean by that is probably our spring term, like the noise basically from the faculty. Oh my God, the AI use is just terrible. So we did everything from, we piloted a number of like AI detection tools. We gave faculty access some different detection tools. We were running them through all sorts of things. And what we were finding is that we were spending so much time to catch students in the act. We sort of flipped the script and said, hey, if you're using an AI agent, cool, because you're going to have to use it probably in gaming, audio, or digital animation. So we're glad you're using it. And so trying to change the behavior of students on how they're using AI. And if they want to use, they create a science simulation, but as long as they're explaining the physics, I'm fine with that, because I feel like they've got another skill by learning how to create an agent to do that. Because if you've ever created an agent, we actually had a lunch and learn last week about how to create an agent. That is not an insignificant task, to be honest with you. And so frankly, if they want to go for it, I say go for it, because I feel like that's teaching them way more skills than maybe I'm teaching them with physics. So I'm all on board with that.
Yeah, I can second that. Like you spend a lot of frustration time trying to get the agent to do what you actually want it to do, and you're having to explain to it what you're trying to achieve. And by the time you've explained to it what you're trying to achieve, you've now explained the lesson that you were trying to do. And so you almost backed them into it where you're like, great, how'd that go for you? Still learned it, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, and like, and the other thing too is like, like Shane, our speech teacher, he's doing everything video. I always give my students options, and I know a lot of other faculty do. I'm just sort of talking about what I know, but they can provide feedback versus video, audio, or written. And again, Harmonize allows for that. Canvas allows for it as well. Harmonize is just a little bit easier. I am finding now that more of my students are doing video or audio feedback to each other, just because it's faster and more convenient, I think.
Oh, that brings up something you had mentioned earlier, where you were actually teaching your instructors to use Whisper AI. Is that what it was?
Yeah. So I'm really slow typing, and I love to give students feedback, but then I get frustrated because it's like I have so many students trying to give feedback. And what I'm using is I use AI now with a speech to text tool. And the one I'm using, I think it's Whisper AI. And the more I've used it, it picks up on my cadence and how I like to phrase things and so forth like that. And so when I'm looking at student work, I just literally push a button and I just talk, and they get written feedback. And so I can either do it in I think the whisper, David, I think it's actually, it's WISPR is the one. That one might work. I've tried a number of them. Some are better than others, but like in Canvas, as long as there's a text box, I can just push the button and I can talk and it transcribes everything that I'm saying. So my feedback went for like 2 sentences to now students are getting like huge amounts of feedback from me. And I even like now, because I never used to do all the feedback in the individual rubric pieces. I used to reference it, but now I can just push the button on each of the text box. So much faster, so much more efficient. Oh.
Sorry about that, David. I had grabbed the
Oh, no.
the wrong link and then gave it to David and to prep and then totally.
But I think that the other thing too about that is like I've been sharing that with faculty and I shared it with my students too. It's like some of you don't like to type and you might find this a better way to like respond. And like if you want to use this for a writing tool, go ahead and write it. But then, you know, it's still their words. And I said, then, you know, go back and edit and whatever. So I'm finding a lot of students are using those kind of tools now too. So again, it's sort of changing the behavior to use AI for good versus evil, rather than trying to do the battle of AI, because you're going to lose that battle, I think, in my opinion, almost every time. So,
and so with your, so then let's talk about peer review for a little bit more before we roll into it, because you had a whole bunch of reporting tools as well that you were using to help you kind of monitor the RSI. But from a peer review perspective, you know, that's increasing motivation because you got the peer-to-peer student thing going on. But but can you give us a summary of like, is peer review is a new thing you're introducing and or newish and or just standardizing it, or give me a little feel for why peer review now and why standardizing it in the way you're doing it? And
yeah, absolutely. So Farah, I hope I said your name correctly. Canvas does have a speech to text, and they also have a video that you can do video feedback in Canvas. I don't know if you've used it, but it is slow as molasses. The video one in particular in Canvas, I mean, I can do video feedback or audio feedback and it takes so long to render. I can go make breakfast, a cup of coffee and come back and finally it posts. So that's a frustration for me that I want a time saver. So that's why I've looked at other tools to do that. So pivoting a little bit to Marcus's question about around peer review, because we're a creative arts school, so many of our faculty are always like bring up student work in class and say, all right, look what Marcus did here in terms of, you know, this rigging for this particular scene, or look at, you know, what Vanessa did over here in terms of this. So the faculty are doing that in their courses, but we've really been pushing on faculty to have students review each other's, because what I found, and it wasn't just me, but I saw this a lot in my class, is that students wanted to see what others were doing. So like, for example, they have to create something. I give them some choice in my class to demonstrate like the first 5 concepts that we've done in physics. And the first thing they said to me is like, when you get done grading them, can you share them in Canvas so we can see what each other's were doing? And it's like, well, why don't you just see what each other are doing from the front end, and you do the work and peer review each other's. And so that's kind of the approach I took it, and a lot of our other faculty like that as well. And so what it's doing is really pushing students to critique each other's. And I would probably bet that students are learning much more from each other than, at least in my class, I can probably say that for a fact, that they are learning more from each other than they are with me. So like my weekly discussion is usually, you know, share a video clip, audio clip, digital animation that's illustrating the concept, explain what's happening, how you would design that. And I have seen students go back and forth with each other. And like, I don't even put in there, like, you have to respond to 2 others anymore. They do, because they're giving, hey, have you tried Unreal Engine and done this? Or have you tried to mix this up in Blender first and do this? So they're giving suggestions to each other in a way that I could never, ever, ever do. And that has sort of like percolated over. And like on Friday, I mentioned the art teacher. I've wanted to have her do peer review for so long because her students do such amazing things, but they never get to see each other's. And so I met with her. She said, okay, I'll meet with you 15 minutes on Friday. An hour and 45 minutes later, our meeting ended. She's already using it this week, and I've already got a message about how she really, really likes this already, because students are seeing each other's and they're learning from that as well. And so that's kind of really why we've pushed the peer review, because frankly, students are learning way more from each other, I think, than they have before.
I have a few questions coming in
Yeah.
chat for you that I want to be able to get back to. First off, there was a comment earlier that I think is important to highlight, which is, when she's talking about having students use Whisper AI for feedback, it's an option among many, because someone pointed out that text to speech can be problematic for people with a stutter, or like this person has MS, my wife has MS, like having things that are like verbally hard to do. You don't even ask them to always do video. You can do video, you can do audio, you can do it, offer options. Student choice is amazing. So from a equity perspective, keep that in mind. Just don't force them into one particular thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a question about, I'll start with a question about peer review, and then I'm going to come back to one from a little bit earlier. Katie's wondering if you're using rubric guidelines for students when they're giving feedback. Like, are you using our rubric model all the time, or some of the time, or how does that go?
What I did is, like, as I said, when I've done some of the stuff before, I looked at what was happening in terms of peer review and across the board in all our courses. And, it was pretty generic, give feedback to somebody else. And that was all there was, but it wasn't giving students any guidelines. So when we started using the Harmonize peer review, Harmonize bakes in some really nice structures about how to give peer reviews to each other. And it ramped up it was just the structure. That was what was lacking for a lot of our peer reviews. You can now have students use a rubric for the peer review. I personally have not turned that on yet, because I feel like they're doing so well right now with just the structure in how to give each other. I don't want to mess with it. I have shared, I know one of my speech instructors, and I think one of our audio instructors are using the rubric. They felt that students got a little bit too mechanical with using the rubric, and they were actually giving better feedback by just using, like, Harmonize has some really good, I don't want to, like, it's sort of generic instructions on how to do a peer review, but they work for any subject. And so students are just doing so much better with that I personally haven't turned the rubric, and I think a lot of people are just letting students use that guideline because they're really excited to give each other feedback. And you do have the option to anonymize the feedback or not. I don't, and I recommend all of our faculty not anonymize the feedback. And there was a couple of faculty like, oh, but I think students are, I said, just try it. If you don't like it, turn it on. We don't anonymize feedback because we're sort of simulating in a work environment. You're going to get feedback from a colleague, from a boss, and they're not going to stand behind the curtain and not tell you who they are. And so, but the guidelines that we have for the peer review they're very structured and they're very positive. You can't like drill somebody in and say, oh, that was just terrible and whatever. If you're going to say that wasn't great, then you better give an example of why it's not great and how they can improve. So again, the structure around it really sets it up for student success.
You have some other questions coming in.
Okay.
Do you worry much about like deepfake videos and such? Because they're like all these things we're saying, they're AI resilient, they're not AI approved. People can always cheat. But do you worry much about videos? Because there's like 11 Labs, Hey Jen does this, deepfake maker IO was just put in the chat.
I don't. I mean, I guess I go back to my middle school days, and I always think about my fifth period after lunch. I had 4 boys and they would work so hard to figure out another way to cheat or do it, and it's like, you're spending way more time doing that than if you just did the assignment. And in my take, there's a handful of students that are going to do it. So I'm not going to make a bunch of rules and worry about those 1 or 2 or 3 students in my class that are doing that. At some point, it's going to catch up with them. And, again, I feel like if they're learning how to do all that, they're learning some other skills doing that anyway. And I feel like sometimes we get into a bit of a cycle that we have to have all these rules because for these kids that are going to do that. And the reality is there's not that many of them that are really, I mean, honestly, if they want to go to all that trouble, good luck. It's kind of like the students with creating an agent. Go for it, because you're going to be way smarter on how to make an agent than I am. And, that's, like I said, I feel like it just comes back to bite them at some point anyway. And making a rule for, a 5% of your student population doesn't do anybody any good, in my opinion.
Cool. Another question came in wondering if you have additional proctored assessments assessing the course content, like do you do proctored exam? Do you do other types of assessments, et cetera?
No, I don't in my class, because my class is really just sort of, again, it's a gen ed, and how I've kind of changed it for that. Most of everything we do, we do have, like, people have quizzes and stuff, but pretty much all of our student submissions every week is application of the content. So in our computer science classes, they're creating code to do something. In our gaming or our animation or game arts, they're creating rigging. So they have to know how to use the software to create the character or whatever. So there, across our board, we just don't have a lot of exams happening that we need anything like that. So we don't.
Nice. And this isn't really a question, but Rebecca called out in the chat that how important it is to give and receive constructive feedback. It's like a life skill. And she's doing this with her grad students. And I'm guessing English, if I'm reading right, because they're submitting papers, but in whatever sense, an important skill. So it's like you're doubling down on these things that are good for RSI, good. Well, and I guess let's dwell on the peer review for RSI then. Like, what role do you take in the peer review? Because if the students are going gangbusters and learning, you're still technically on the hook for some substantive feedback for them. But if they're doing an amazing job, you almost don't want to step in for fear that it quiets the room. Like, how do you deal with that?
So I'll give you an example. I was trying to think I should have just looked at my physics class, what we did 2 weeks ago. My audio students, they brought something up with how they could use it in like computer coding. I had never ever thought about how that was an application of this. And so my feedback to the student was more around like, wow, I was like totally blown away by what you chose as an example. And then I really focus more on the feedback that they're giving each other. In terms of my feedback, it's like, you were really positive. You pointed out 3 things, and so I'm trying to critique how they're giving feedback so they continue to give feedback better. Honestly, most of the time, I would say not just in my class, but what I'm seeing in so many other classes about peer reviews, once the students get into a routine of doing them regularly, the feedback that they give each other is probably better than any feedback I could give them anyway. And so, and sometimes it's just my lack of understanding of the areas of study that, like I don't know really how to build anything in a game engine or things like that. But I'm learning. And that's one of the things too, is I always try to point out to students, like, I learned so much from your post because I didn't know you could do that. And so, I can give you an example, like even the last week we were talking about liquids. If you're a gamer, look at fluids like oceans and water in games, and how they make that is really incredible. And there's a whole process that they really do apply the physics principles to, like, oceans in games. I had no idea. And so for me, like, I just always compliment my students, like, you've taught me something this week. I didn't know how that they did that. And I've looked at things differently because of that. And so a lot of my feedback is more just sort of acknowledging just the good work that they're doing versus the back and forth. Because again, I feel like they're doing a better job of critiquing each other.
Nice. All right, let's pivot around into tools then, because we're at about 45 minutes in. And you had some interesting uses, especially for, I think, the Canvas users. Like, you're using a bunch of different tools to help you with the RSI side of things.
Yeah.
So maybe spend a little time on that for I
Sure.
I didn't ask what people were doing, but I'm guessing there's a lot of people who are in your boat of like, I'm supposed to monitor RSI how type of thing.
So when I did RSI the first time, it was literally, I went into every single class. I read through announcements. I looked at their assignments that they were giving. What were the assignments like? What type of feedback were they using? What were the rubrics? How were they engaging in the discussions? It took me the best part of 3, sometimes 4 weeks to do that. It was pretty tedious, but it wasn't tedious. It was just very time consuming, I would say, because you had to look under the hood. So we, this summer, we upped our Canvas with something called Intelligence Insights. And it's an AI tool that overlays Canvas. And basically Canvas touts that if there's any data in AI, you can pull it out of there. And they're not kidding. And so it took me about a week to figure out the right prompts. But like I can write a prompt that says something like, from September 13th to October 1st, which courses had a weekly announcement, or something like that. And then I get a list of every course that has a weekly announcement. And so then it's like, oh, okay, and if they, or which courses don't have it. So then I know which ones are. I can check rubrics in each course. I can check faculty engagement in the course. All of the things that I was doing by manually, most of them now I can do through the use of AI and Intelligent Insights. The other thing that I use a lot for this is Harmonize has a dashboard that I can get to as the administrator that actually shows me how our faculty are engaging in discussions. And so I have like this like nice, it's, you know, like when you go get your car done and you get the red, green, yellow, you get kind of the red, green, yellow as well, a little bit in terms of how things, what faculty are doing and how they're engaging. So again, instead of going through every course to see if Marcus was really responding to the discussions with the students, I know what Marcus's engagement as an instructor is. So using those two tools has been a game changer. Intelligent Insights has also, we're checking retention. So I finally have a prompt written that like which courses have students that have less than 70%, have more than 2 missing assignments, or have consistent late work. And so I can just pull up a report now with just doing an AI prompt and hand that off to the advising team. So they have that to do it, but I can also then figure out which faculty have a lot of struggling learners and think about how I can support them with their struggling learners. It's been a game changer because again, figuring out the right prompt was part of it, but once I've done that, next month will be super easy when I do the next RSI check.
Thanks. David put the link for that one out into the chat for those that have them or who want to take a look. If you're using Canvas, I don't know if there's an equivalent in other LMSs.
And it's not a very expensive tool. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, basically, what it saved my time, it probably paid my salary. Like it was about half a month of my salary is what it cost for us. And I don't know if they change it on the size of your instance or anything like that. So
I'm sure they do.
I'm sure they do. But I can tell you that just like our advising team loves it because they can pull off reports every week about which students had missing work or late work for the week so that they know who to target for that week in terms of support. Yeah, it's been a game changer.
Nice. So we got about 10 minutes left for Q&A. Definitely want to prioritize the questions. I will demo Harmonize peer review just because I'd love people to see it. But I'm going to prioritize your questions. So get your questions into the chat and we will filter them out to Alyson or myself if it's appropriate for me to answer them. And we will do those. While we're doing that, the big thing that Harmonize, I think, brought to Alyson, and Alyson, you can confirm or deny this. I have no issues with correcting me. Is this idea that like multimedia stuff is much easier to do? I think if I summed it up in one statement, it's like you're not in a text only world, so you're not as susceptible to AI, and we offer all kinds of tools just to make that easier on students and instructors, both in the upload, sharing, record a screen share, do a video, pause it and critique it at a certain timestamp, draw on an image, whatever it is, so that you're doing more what the internet looks like today versus text-only discussions and activities. Is that fair, Alyson?
Yeah, you know, I think the one thing you said there, Marcus, too, is like just drawing on stuff so you can annotate. So I have in one of my other classes, students submit like they're submitting images because we're doing some design thinking things, and so they're doing brainstorm boards and things like that. Using Harmonize, I can literally annotate on their boards or whatever they're turning in, and I can like write on it. And I know you can with like, you know, if you can use like a little tool like on an iPad and things like that, but just the ease of use for multimedia is like from everything from video to audio to annotating. It happens so much faster in Harmonize than it does in Canvas. I mean, Canvas has some of this, but it's slow. slow.
Yeah. Yeah, and so this is a peer review I opened up, and please get your questions in because I would rather prioritize questions than show you peer review tools. I see one new one came in. So, so should AI be used to critique grade papers?
I
That's
can
good.
kind of answer that one. So we're actually piloting. So Canvas is rolling out a lot of AI tools right now. I just noticed in my Canvas instance, they now have a little chat bot we're testing out this week. But we're testing out the new AI grading in Canvas that they're developing. Honestly, what we were finding, and it's not just me, and that there's like 200 people across the country that's testing this AI tool. If students do really, really good work, they're fine. But students who are doing less than an A quality work, the AI feedback is not on the mark yet. And there were a couple of people in this AI tested grading group that have tested out some other tools as well and have found sort of the similar thing. If good work gets great feedback using an AI grader, less than like top-notch work, the feedback is marginal at best. So
yeah, and I'll second this in that AI has its own biases built in. Like in our tools, we have a ability to assess with a rubric, but we refuse to show the score to the instructor student. We only show generalities of, are you doing okay, medium, or great on this particular part of the rubric, because there's jitter and there's inaccuracies in there, and it can be as biased as a human. And so we'll show all of that to the student. We'll show it to the instructor without any of the grading component, but we still rely on the instructor to be able to actually do the grading because even though instructors, yes, have bias, we're at a point in this world where still human bias is better than AI bias in my book, because you can know your own biases, but you have no idea what the AI biases are. So
and
it's
I will tell you
an
that
assistant.
the AI tool that we've tried, the one that Canvas is coming out, and I heard this from the other thing, I spent more time trying to fit the rubric so that the AI would grade it like I wanted. I could have probably graded it faster than building that rubric. So
Yeah.
that was definitely, I think the other thing in terms of, Teresa, your question about can or should AI, there was a lawsuit actually, and I can't remember what university it was, that they were using AI grading, and students sued because like we're paying to get feedback from a faculty, and I don't want AI feedback. And so we kind of have a little bit of that, like we were curious about it, but it's not, I don't think it's fully baked yet.
Yeah. And something brought up another accessibility point, which I think is super key. So we've been talking all about doing multimedia, doing screen share, doing all these things. Make sure you're keeping it accessible. Like we're actually adding, so for those that aren't aware, there's a new Title II requirement coming down for public institutions that you have to have what's called an audio description on all videos. And you're probably familiar with captions where it would tell you what I'm speaking and put it at the bottom of the screen. An audio description is tell you what I'm doing. So if you're blind, you wouldn't know that I'm kind of looking crazy right now unless someone said, no, man in a red and white shirt is waving his hands above his head. That's an audio description. We are doing that for videos in Harmonize starting this spring so that we can maintain that accessibility, and we're adding alt text for images. And so the whole thing is like your stuff needs to be screen reader friendly, but also if you're pushing into these multimedia realms, consider how to do that and how to keep it accessible, because it's complicated and it's getting more strict. Like you have to apply with the WCAG 21 AA guidelines, if you guys know what those are, come April if you're a public institution. So yeah, be very careful when you push into some of these realms. It came up earlier in the sort of the speech to text realm, but also in terms of video. Like if you have a visually impaired student and you're doing a bunch of video, are you leaving them behind? So be cautious, and make sure there are tools out there, and not just ours, that will do audio descriptions for you, and so that you can keep that accessibility thing in mind.
Marcus, one thing you did mention too, like, so when students submit, I tell them and I show them how to do it. Harmonize will get, we call it AI. I think it's called AI coaching, that it sort of, again, it tells the students like, hey, based on the rubric, you might need to improve like this or whatever. And I can see if the students use that as well. When I'm grading, I find my students are using it more and more now. And because I make sure that I look at that as I'm grading. So I say, hey, you know what? If you use the coach, the AI coach, you might have had a better score on this. So this way, I like using AI for students this way, because it's giving them a little place to make them at least reflect and think about what they're submitting.
You know, and back on the should you grade thing, like I have the rubric in front of me here, and this is what we show students, like little room for improvement, much room for improvement. And then we just reiterate what the rubric says. And there are some things that AI just does not do well. And so we will refuse to do those. And so you have to be careful, and you have to know what AI can and can't do, because it will give its old college try to assess a particular part of your assignment, and it will just flat out lie, honestly. And so you have to be careful with that perspective as well. And Teresa put a good point of, you can assume all students are equal. Keep UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, if people are not familiar, when you're doing your course design, and academia or business. So it's important to offer all of these different modes of communication and such as well. So other questions for us? I think we regained some of your time. I will reiterate, the question came up around the digital accessibility thing I'm talking about. It's Title II, and I think someone actually put in a link for it into the chat as well, which is awesome. Come April of 2026, you have a lot more accessibility requirements than you had before, so you might want to pay attention to that if you're a public institution. If you're private, it's still Title III and it hasn't changed. So open question there whether it changes much for them, but public institutions, come April, it gets harder. So might check it out if you haven't yet. I think it's a good thing. Don't get me wrong, it's harder, but it's also really well-defined accessibility. Before April, it simply, I think it was called a equivalent or effective communication, and so it was kind of vague as to what that meant. Now it's like, here are the rules. Here's exactly what you need to do. Alt text for images, transcripts, audio descriptions for videos, all of these things. And so we're using AI to help with that, just because it's this huge instructor workload. But there's a bunch of tools out there that do this as well that can help with it. Yuja is one. Ecolabs.ai is doing audio descriptions. There's a bunch of tools out there that can help. So check those out.
So Marcus and Alyson, would you like to end with something else?
I should have done what David did, because I'm not a great salesperson. David put out that we do free semester pilots if you want to try some of this stuff. No commitment type. You can unlimited for a year semester. We believe in the tools quite a bit, so you're welcome to try them out. He put a link out for that. So I'll take my sales hat off after that one. I'm not the sales guy I should be. And Alyson, thank you so much for doing this with us and for sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'd say two last things is that the free pilot worked well for us, because then it worked better with our budget. So we were able to try it before we committed our budget to it. And I think my last thing would be, I think it's very similar to that last speaker. Teach student behavior to use AI for good versus evil. I think if you try to battle the AI thing, it's going to be a frustrating battle. So AI is here, so let's figure out how to use it for good.
Okay,
right, so
Marcus and Alyson, thank you so much. So so everybody, thank you for coming. We're gonna end day 2 here. We will be back tomorrow. We will have the daily show. I'm putting a link in if you want to play along and answer our Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy questions. We have a lot of great sessions tomorrow too, so please join us. So Valerie, do you have anything?
I just love how full circle today was. We started out talking about 42 and we ended up with 42 lines.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just saying. I
did that for you, Valerie. That was.
I know you did. I appreciate it. I love it. I appreciate it. No, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who participated today. And yes, they were all great sessions today. If you can make it for the pregame, I want to call it the daily show. It has been, I'm just going to say, it has been action packed the past 2 days. And so you really, if you can, depending on your time zone, if you can make it early, if you can hop in there, definitely come back tomorrow. But a huge thank you to everybody. I am going to end the recording here in a second, as I always promise. I will not kick you out because I know sometimes people have a question that perhaps they would like to ask offline. So, but just for all of the people watching the replay in the future, I want to say thank you for your participation as well. And come back. We got 3 more days. All right.